What's going on, Soul Nation? Ginger Prime here. Joining me, CammyCakes from YouTube, Twitch, Destiny fame, content creator, streamer extraordinaire, many things. We've been actually having a conversation. This is take two, and we're gonna have fun. We're just gonna be
actually take two,
and we're gonna have some fun talking about Phantasy Star Online 2, the open. I keep saying open beta. In my mind, it's open because my heart is opened to the world of Phantasy Star. I am so happy that so many people are checking this out, but you have a history with Phantasy Star. Why don't you talk about why you're excited about Phantasy Star based off your history?
So I started on the GameCube with episode 1 and 2, and later played Universe. And then once it was announced to be in Japan for Phantasy Star Online 2, I stayed completely dark. I didn't look at any gameplay, didn't read any guides, so that when it eventually came to the States, I would be able to experience that at the same pace as my friends and at the same pace as potentially my subscribers.
So as a veteran of previous Phantasy Star, games in that regards with PSO and PSU, and also staying in the dark, what's your initial take? What's your hot take from your experience this beta? How far did you get in, and why did you choose to stay dark?
Well, it's so nice experiencing it for the first time. You sort of take a look around, stop and smell the roses approach, versus if you played it for 8 years before then, you're just going to blast through content. And if I make videos that reflect that 8-year approach, it might be off-putting to viewers who are seeing the series for the first time. And as far as why level 40 in the closed beta, that's because it was only 2 days, maybe 30 hours worth of beta.
We got a little extra time because we ran into issues at the start of the beta. I had to step away because I ended up having some family commitments, so I only got to 20. But at the end of the day, I was like, yeah, it felt so good to actually run around. It felt so good just for me to have it English. Did you go with the English voices?
I went with all English. I'm going to eventually go back to Japanese, but English for now, because I want to see all the work they put in. I want to go see how hard the voice actors worked and what they decided to select. So when I see it in the original language, I can make the comparisons.
Well, and then also I think that gives you a good insight into the story, so that you can kind of listen. That's actually a really good point that you make, just about seeing the amount of work that they've put in. Somebody was saying, like, it's the same game, just copy, paste, and go. Why is it taking so long? It's like the amount of work that is clear. Like, because I've been playing on Xbox One X, it has the 4K support. There is some interface changes that they've made. It's connected in Xbox Live, so it's kind of cool to see my friends list kind of show up for those who are on my ship and playing. I thought that was a nice little touch. Having, and I went in. I eventually caved. Like, I was just like you. I was like, great, Phantasy Star, it's coming. They keep saying it's coming. Eventually, lost all hope, and so then this October I couldn't stand it, and I had to go play. So I've had that kind of experience, but I'm doing something slightly different, where over in Japan I played Force. Here I've been just playing on a Hunter, and I was planning on actually moving over to Gunner, because I was just like, Gunner is just so much fun, and I've touched all the classes. But it's funny because, like, when you start out, I was like, I have no money, I've got no weapons, and so I did go switch to Gunner, but then I was like, I don't have guns yet. They haven't dropped for me, and I don't have and I couldn't afford to buy them from the vendor because I was so broke. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna go with Hunter for the rest of the beta. I'll probably switch over to Gunner as soon as the release happens. So like you said you stayed dark. How was it, like, stepping into this world with your friends? Like, you could have always gone over to play in Japan. I think that's one of the things that even somebody, I've seen a couple comments like, hey, while you're waiting, why don't you just go play on the Japanese server? Is there...
Yeah, I just don't want to ruin that first experience. I want to experience it both at the same pace as my friends and my subscribers. It'll really point out what I need to cover as far as content, because if I'm confused about something with the amount of hours I put in, surely someone who's just starting the game will eventually get there.
Is there an easy crossroad from Destiny to Phantasy Star? So if somebody's like, hey, Destiny's just not either working for me right now, or I think I saw in your video, you're like, I've done everything and I'm covered for the future if things change with the guns.
I future-proofed my Destiny grinding.
So with that, is there a natural crossover that you could easily say, hey, Destiny players, like, you got to check out this game? Or is it something that just kind of speaks to you from a nostalgic perspective?
The problem with Destiny is it tries to appeal to so many different audiences. So not every person who's subscribed to my channel plays Destiny for the same reason. For those that chose to play Destiny because of the action RPG MMO elements, they're going to love Phantasy Star, maybe even more. But for those who chose Destiny purely for a first-person shooter, they might not like it. And that's okay. PSO does offer some sort of hybrid, and I experimented with that, where you go for the free aim on the Ranger, the Z aim.
Yeah.
And the advantage to that long term is if you can hit precision shots, you do more damage.
Yeah.
And so if you want that first person experience, you get a halfway point.
It's almost like this a third person shooter in some degrees. I'm not actually good at the Z aim. That's one of the things I discovered about myself. I was like, okay.
In the previous take of this, you asked like, what's the difference between like full time and maybe a subscriber who can only put in a few hours a week? Well, that's the difference right there. When I play these kind of games, I think long term, as in overall mastery and not just single class mastery. Someone who doesn't have as many hours to play, they might want to pick Hunter or Braver and just stick to that and learn it because it makes the most of their time. But since I can put career level hours into this game, I'm going to learn everything, I'm going to master everything, and I'm going to play the game as if it's just practice. So for Ranger, I will free aim everything until I get good at it.
That's actually really good to note. So when you say career level, because like we kind of talked about this obviously in the first take before everything crashed, the amount of content that this game offers, it seems that it offers enough for somebody like you who's going to be full-timing it, making content around it, streaming content around it, but also for somebody who has that job who can only put in so many hours a week. Have you experienced anything like that in recent games? Like we kind of started almost down a road of Anthem before we started hitting record. And so essentially when we look at that as a game itself, not offering a compelling end game, offering kind of like a one and done story if you're willing to, spend $5 and just experiencing the story. Is that a trend that you see that is when you as a content creator evaluate a game to play and a game to make content around, something that it can appeal to a wide variety of people?
Yes. The bigger variety usually means potentially bigger population. But the key difference, and this is what I'm seeing, is that if they don't design an end game with an extremely high skill ceiling and maybe incentivized being good at the game, then it's hard to keep people playing because eventually they're going to max out their personal skill, have nothing left to do in the game, nothing to push themselves and challenge themselves, and they'll leave and go to a new game. And that's perfectly okay for your standard AAA, but for an MMO, you want that replayability.
Yeah. So what appeals to you most about what you've seen so far in that replayability loop, in that content grinding loop that might not appeal to somebody who has less time?
I see so much potential with chaining all these photon arts. That's what they call in Phantasy Star the special abilities. And I see a lot of potential specifically in the movement ones, as far as chaining multiple of them together to sort of get sweet spots on bosses so that they can't hit you, but you're still doing the most damage possible.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that when you were just on, and I'm bad at actually pronouncing people's names. If you haven't caught on to that, Azler.
Azalera? Yeah, I call him Azel at this point.
Cool, Azel, thank you. I was like, so you were just on his podcast, and he taught me, he's like, that in a lot of these games that each class kind of does have a movement strategy in which that you can even set up your weapons and skills so you can just get around. And I've seen some stuff, like it's just like with Braver. Somebody was playing Braver, and he was just like all over the place. And I was like, that is... I think that as what I would call myself is more that kind of hardcore casual in the regards like that. For me, when I see somebody do something, I'm like, I have to find out how you're doing that because it looks cool. It looks fun. It apparently is a challenge, but it's a skill that you can work to master. And it just changes the way you play the game. In that regards, like the movement can end up being so fluid and so, almost priceless in a way in which that you can kind of like.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example of that loop of what had me hooked in the beta. Once the wheels started turning, it was for my entire friend group, actually, because the three of us did put in 24 hours apiece. And so maybe by hour 4, we could see the potential. Maybe by hour 16, we were like, okay, now we understand. Now we can do some of this potential.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time it ended, we sort of had a roadmap of what we wanted to work on when the open beta comes back.
So with that, like, what did you pick as a part of that? I know you told me. So just for everybody listening,
I went for Ranger, and then I went for a subclass of Tector so that I could offer some sort of support abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that's one of the cool things that I love about the subclass system in games. Like as a avid Final Fantasy 11 and 14 player, being those are my like on-roads into the world of the MMO. 11 had the sub-job system, and so it just kind of gives you this uniqueness. No matter what metas form, you're avid Destiny player, there are metas that form. But I like that even especially with a friend group, like the meta, yeah, it's out there, but you can build whatever you want to build because you're just running with your group of friends. It's about like, what can you bring uniquely to the group rather than serving a meta. And especially since it hasn't technically formed yet, there isn't this is the way that you want to build. Do you, what's your perspective on meta in these kind of games? Because you obviously have a group that you run with. I think that's kind of a difference when it comes down to preform parties versus matchmaking, parties. But do you have a perspective on meta in regards to Phantasy Star?
As in, what is the most optimal for a boss strategy, or
does it matter?
Most optimal team composition?
There's an optimal side, but do you live and die by meta in this regard, like the optimal, or do you go based off of something that's going to provide a unique value to your team?
It depends on the intensity of the player.
Okay.
Me and one of my friends are career players. We're both content creators and can play this game for 24 hours in a row without worrying about school or work or anything. My brother, on the other hand, he can only dedicate a couple hours a day in between his master's schedule and whatnot. So for him, we're going to make sure he optimizes his playtime. And he also plays on controller. So we want him to play something that he can have less hours than us, but stay on the same pace, and something that works with controller. Whereas me and the other career player, we're both choosing Ranger and Gunner because we know we have the time to put into mastering it. Okay. Since it might have a higher skill ceiling.
Okay, that's actually that's a really cool thing. I like that you play with your brother, because that's one of the great things about this game finally coming here, is that I can actually, because my brother's not going to go play on Japan. There's just no way that's gonna. Best. It's just not going to work. And so here I'm like, somebody was saying, why don't you go play on Japan? I was like, you don't get it. Like, it's all about being able to play with my friends, and especially with my brother and my wife. My wife's like, let's go, let's do this. I'm ready to play. And I'm like, I'm just waiting for the date. We're going to have to schedule some time. I'm going to get some sitters for the kids. And we're going to sit here and just going to dive in and go, all in when that is, so we can kind of have that experience. One of the things that I've done, which is interesting because it's a slightly different perspective than yours from content, is that I use my brother or my wife or my friends as that new player experience. So I'll go in, like I went in on Japan and I had a new player experience and I've learned, but it can distort how I see the game. It's like I might end up not explaining something clearly because I've been playing this game for 6 months.
So you keep an eye on their journey so you can apply that to your,
like anytime that somebody's like, I'm like, hey Brandon, I need you to watch me play this game, or I need you to play this game with me. And then I'm going to write down all your questions. And that's how we'll like, okay, look, I think there's a guide there, or I think we need to make sure that we explain something clearly. Obviously this is just a taste. We don't know of a PC release, or a PC beta or any other news. This week's been kind of hard because I've been, I didn't get to spend as much time with the Xbox beta as I wanted to, but it was something that felt like, kind of a dream. I told somebody, don't wake me if this is a dream. Just let me live.
Oh, absolutely a dream.
What are you most excited about when this launches? Because you said that there is definitely some crossover in your community, so you are going to be playing and making Phantasy Star Online 2 content.
Yes.
So what would be your strategy like when this game drops?
Number one priority.
Yeah.
I want to just establish a sector of the community.
Yeah.
I want this to be a group of people who want to be the best to each other. And same community vibe I sort of have in my streams. I want to apply to Phantasy Star and hopefully rub off on other people.
Yeah. So, where can people find you? How can people get a part?
/CammyCakes and youtube.com/CammyCakes Gaming.
Is there anything that I haven't asked or that you want to share your thoughts about Phantasy Star before we wrap up this video?
Maybe progression through the beta as far as a new player.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get in, you're maybe a little bit overwhelmed by the UI. I thought it was just a tutorial missions sort of cluttering it. And once you start getting through those, it makes a lot more sense. So that was an initial pitfall between the three of us as far as navigating it. Then we started to see the potential of our photon arts chaining together. And we started practicing those from maybe hour 4 to 16. And then by the time we started the next day, that's when we put that practice into action, and it was so gratifying.
Nice.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah,
For
please.
the Ranger, it was take a shot, chain a burst shot, enemy lunges towards you, you whip 180 degrees to look behind you, start the rocket ride, cancel out of the rocket ride with a dodge, immediately stealth shot because you can see them charging another attack. You anticipate that attack, and since the stealth shot is a projectile and not hit scan, you have to anticipate their movement. And if you land that headshot and it kills it, you just hit that entire chain. And you could see yourself doing this easily many, many, many hours later.
So, is there VOD footage of of all that being done?
I didn't save like 30-second clips. I saved entire 30-minute sessions. So I'm sure I can mine and find those kind of moments. But
that sounds epic. I mean, it's so cool how. I've always defined a good game as a game that anybody can kind of get into, but then you really start to master it. And when you start to master it, you're like, all of these little systems come into play and connect, like with movement, with the chaining of abilities, with the gear and in and of itself. Did you get into any of the gear upgrading systems while you were playing?
A little bit. What I was getting at, though, is all three of us took the approach of we're playing to practice, not playing to blow through the content, because we easily could have did the optimal route of just grabbing all the client orders, doing the highest XP missions, hitting the highest level cap, but we'd suck at the game, for lack of a better word.
Right. You're just
Even though we're a higher level, we just suck at the game. So we said we're going to hit level 40 naturally to be able to experience the harder content within our playtime. So let's not rush it. Let's learn to play the game first and unlock the content while we do it, not get the max level and not know how to play.
And it's just like, well, now I've skipped over like you did a warp whistle like in Super Mario 3, and then you're like, well, oh wait, I was supposed to learn what I could jump on.
Yep.
Guys, be sure to go check out CammyCakes on both YouTube and Twitch. The links will be in the description of this below. Obviously, we'll be both very excited in sharing all kinds of information and news as it relates to, and hopefully we'll get a release date at some point here in the, I'm hopeful the coming weeks that they'll at least tell us when I need to schedule some time off work. Cammy, thank you so much for coming and hanging out and making time to sit here and talk to me about some Phantasy Star. Because
no problem. I hope to bump into you in this open beta at some point.
What ship are you on?
I'm choosing ship 1 based on a recommendation from another Destiny content creator who is a little bit worried that maybe the population might shrink up and ship 1 might be the one to be on.
Okay. I'm on ship
hopeful
2.
for it. I think it will be.
They also made it to where it's not region locked. So it's like, I know people like in Europe and they're like, hey, when can we, it's like, well, you can maybe just get a VPN and, call it a day.
Secretly, I hope the Destiny community ends up on ship 3 just because it's called Thorn. But we'll see.
All right, Destiny community challenge has been issued. We'll see if you guys show up and check it out. As a free-to-play game, I think it offers no risk for you if you're looking for something to check out. So please do so. Anyway, for Ginger Prime, my name is Brian. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.